We just want to be like everybody else. That was the cry of the people of ancient Israel to Samuel, their prophet, their priest. We just want to be like the others. Give us a king like the other nations have. We just want to be like them. What's behind all of that? I know as children, children often don't want to stand out. They want to be the same. They want to kind of be like their friends. They don't want to be different. Maybe there's a little bit of that going on here. Israel is still a young nation, and they want to be like the other nations that are around. Walter Brueggemann, however, sees this text differently. Walter Brueggemann recognizes that the Bible, both Old and New Testaments, cannot be fully understood unless we recognize it as a continual struggle between classes. Yes, between a lower class and an upper class. The Bible is a story of class struggle. People of Israel want to have a king, and Samuel very clearly says to them, if you have a king, you are creating an upper class. And that upper class, the king and all of the princes, they will demand so much of you. They will take your land, they will take your sons, they will take your daughters, they will take a tenth of all that you have at the very least. There will be a class structure that will create difficulty and pain and struggle for you forever. And the people say, we don't care. We want to be like others. Proclamations of kings have created difficulty and challenge throughout society, both kings and queens. Do you know the royal proclamation entitled Terra Nullius? Terra Nullius. It literally means the land is empty. And it was the proclamation that was made in 1700s, I can't remember the exact date, about the new land that had been discovered. Although there were all kinds of people, we call them indigenous peoples, first peoples, even though they were great in number in this land that was at that time called Turtle Island. According to the proclamation of the king, the land was empty. There were no people living in it. So the people, the colonizers, could just come over and claim land in the name of the king. It sets up immediately class struggles and challenges and difficulties that were in Europe and then came over into this land. And first peoples suffered deeply because of that class struggle. I want to share with you just a few vignettes, a few stories, experiences that I have had, stories that I have been told that kind of reflect that kind of struggle that first peoples have had. I met a man in Mishki-Gongamong in northern Ontario. He was in his mid-40s. He was struggling from addictions. He was struggling from alcoholism. He was deeply struggling in terms of his identity. And he told me this story. As a child, he didn't live on reserve. He lived just outside the reserve, which meant that he had to go to the white schools. And in the white schools, he was one of just a very few Indian people. That's what they were referred to 40 years ago. And in his school, he was always called a dirty little Indian. And he could never figure out what made him dirty, what made him little, and what made him Indian. He couldn't figure out why. Why is everybody calling me a dirty little Indian? I just want to be like everybody else. And in school, in grades 1 and 2 and 3, it was a small school, there were 2 girls, he said, in pretty beautiful dresses who were always in the classroom ahead of him. And he just thought they were beautiful. Wonderful, wonderful friends that he wanted to make. But they never saw him as anything other than a dirty little Indian. One day, while they were all in class, this man, he farted. And the entire class laughed. And they said, "You see, you're just a dirty little Indian." And in his mind, searching for why they called him a dirty little Indian, he made that connection. Because, he said to me, I never heard the 2 little girls in pretty dresses fart. And so I associated every time I farted, from that time on, right through my teenage years, into my young adult life, every time I farted, I thought of myself as a dirty little Indian. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Every one of us have passed gas. Maybe some of you have already done it today. Maybe some of you have done it in the sanctuary. But can you imagine every time you pass gas that's what identifies you as a dirty little Indian? He said only when he was taken under the protection and care of an elder in the community that he was close to and began to learn his own language, Ojibwe, did he begin his journey of healing. He said, to this day, English is my language of pain. Ojibwe is my language of healing. He just wanted to be like everybody else. I was part of an organization called North-South Partnership for Children, and it was a kind of a partnership between communities, 30 communities in Northern Ontario, and a number of people, a variety of different organizations in Southern Ontario, when we were trying to make connections towards a sense of healing and reconciliation. And I remember one day we were in Toronto at a meeting, and we were divided into table groups. And of course, the people who were there, the white colonizers like myself, far outnumbered the people who had come down from the north, because it was very expensive to come down. We had one person from Paganjikam First Nations at our table. And someone in our group said something that we all gasped at. He said, part of the difficulty that I have is that whenever I see you people, you all look the same to me. And you could hear a collective gasp around the table, except for the man from Paganjikam. You know what he said? Because he'd heard these things so many times. He said, yeah, we talk about that too. Because to us, as Indigenous people, all you white people, you all look the same. And there was an incredible moment of healing. Because this man knew who he was and could articulate that incredibly beautifully. Healing and reconciliation are happening, even though in our society, many people still talk about Indians as dirty little Indians. I think I've told you this story before, but it's a powerful one that needs to be told over and over again. I was playing golf in Waterloo, and this has got to be 10, 15 years ago. There was a frost delay, and so a number of, yes, all of us white elderly people gathered around the practice green waiting to play golf. And the conversation began to go downhill very, very, very quickly. Started talking about indigenous people and the struggles that they caused and how lazy they were. And I interrupted. I had to interrupt. And I say, who do we think we are? And then there was a fella, he was a teacher. I hate to say he was a teacher, but he was. And he taught just outside of one of the communities in Northern Ontario. And he blurted out, without realizing, I think, what he was saying. He said, their problem is that they want nothing to do with our ways. And I said to him, thank God for that. Thank God for that. You see, there is so much that we can learn from people, particularly from people who have been oppressed and have had years of injustice. We talk about resilience of people, and I'm almost afraid to talk about the resilience of First Nations and First Peoples here in Canada, because when we as colonizers talk about resilience, there is the fear that I always have where we say, oh, it really doesn't matter what we do because they're a resilient people. No, it does matter what we do. Because as strong and as resilient as they are human beings like us, and they are not in a lower class than we are, regardless of whatever royal proclamation there may be years ago or even in our society today. I had the privilege of introducing to an Anglican church some people from Grassy Narrows. It's hit the news again lately, mercury poisoning over the last 40 years. And they were talking about the struggles of mercury poisoning in their water sources, in their water systems in Grassy Narrows. And I was racking my brain in terms of how to introduce them, and I came across this phrase about what it means, what the word Canada came from, which is Kanata, village. And I thought, what a wonderful way to introduce them as fellow villagers. And so that's how I introduced them, as fellow villagers. And then when they rose to speak, they thanked me for my kind words, but they said, we don't blame you because that's the way you have been taught. But what binds us together as people is not because we are part of the same village or part of the same community or part of the same nation or country. What binds us together is our common humanity. We are people together. We are all creatures created by the Creator. I just was in awe of that kind of teaching. Around the same time, I was exploring this concept that Archbishop Desmond Tutu often talks about from South Africa, Ubuntu. Have you heard that phrase, Ubuntu? It's a beautiful phrase. It's something that is so different from our Western way of thinking. In our Western world, we think of ourselves as individuals. René Descartes came up with this famous dictum, I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. And out of that Cartesian philosophy comes, along with other philosophers of that time as well, this strong and rugged individualism that seems to pervade our society. And in that rugged individualism, we are all alone, fighting against each other, fighting for everything that we need. Ubuntu is perhaps the exact opposite of that. Definition of Ubuntu, various definitions. A person is a person through other people. I am because we are. There is no such thing as an individual person. It is a societal, environmental, psychological, emotional, and biological impossibility. None of us exist by ourselves. We exist as people. I am because we are. At that time, I was talking to a number of Indigenous leaders in Guelph. I was working in Guelph at the time. Came across a beautiful elder by the name of René Mashaki. He's an incredible Indigenous artist, storyteller, painter, musician. And I was saying, René, I came across this beautiful teaching about Ubuntu, and I told him exactly what I was just saying to you. And he said, Marty, in our various cultures, all First Nations cultures, that's at the very core of who we are. And I was reminded of that organization that I had been a part of years before. Remember I told you North-South Partnership for Children? The actual Ojibwe name for that is Mama Shwe Jike Win. That's a mouthful. Mama Shwe Jike Win. And what it literally means, giving and receiving with no expectation of return. Giving and receiving with no expectation of return. It's what pulls us together and identifies us together as human beings. It's not an individual fight for your own rights and freedoms. No, it's being a people and recognizing that we are in deep relationship one to the other. We are human. That's what connects us. It's our relationships. That's what connects us. The difficulty with all of that, I'm going way too long. There are so many stories that I could tell you. The bottom line is that when we open our eyes to see the power that there is in voices that are not our own, then we can recognize that we are people together, created by the Creator, as our First Nations people tell us. Created by the Creator. The Creator is the one that we answer to. The Creator is the one who formed us. The Creator is the one in whom we have all of life's experiences. And looking to the Creator, instead of looking to a class system created by kings and rulers who would divide us, looking to the Creator is what gives us peace and solidarity and care and compassion and justice. Thanks be to God. Amen.